A man spends 40 years building, every decision calculated, every hour monetized, every relationship measured by what it produces. He climbs, he achieves, he accumulates. Then one day the machine stops. Retirement, redundancy, the role that consumed his identity disappears. And he discovers something terrifying. He doesn't know who he is without it. This isn't a story about losing money. It's about losing yourself and not having a backup version to activate. The trap isn't retirement itself. The trap is that we built our entire sense of self on something temporary, then acted shocked when it ended. The architecture of the trap. Most men don't accidentally become their jobs. It's systematic. From childhood, identity gets fused with production. What do you do? The question assumes your doing defines your being. A boy learns early, your value equals your output. Your worth gets measured in titles, paychecks, status markers. By 40, the merger is complete. You're not a man who has a career. You're a career that happens to be a man. This isn't weakness. It's cultural programming disguised as ambition. We celebrate the man who sacrifices everything for work. We call him dedicated. We call him provider. We call him successful. What we don't call him is fragile. But fragility is exactly what we've created. The identity production fusion feels safe while you're productive. The machine runs. The external world validates constantly. Emails confirm importance. Promotions confirm worth. Paychecks confirm survival. You don't need to know who you are because the market tells you every single day. Then the market stops talking. Retirement arrives, or layoffs happen, or your body finally refuses. The external validation system collapses, and you're standing in the ruins of a self you never actually built. Men in their 50s call it depression. They call it loss of purpose. They call it a midlife crisis arriving late. What they're actually experiencing is the removal of the scaffolding that held up an identity that was never load-bearing to begin with. The Stoic recognition. Marcus Aurelius understood this. A man born into absolute power, trained his entire life to rule, spent every moment performing the role of emperor. He had more external validation than any human in history. Yet in his meditations, he returns obsessively to a single question. What remains when the role disappears? He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't motivational poster philosophy. It's the recognition that everything external, title, position, authority, resources, is temporary and ultimately outside your control. The emperor could lose his throne tomorrow. The general could lose his army. The businessman could lose his company. And when he does, what's left? That's not a question most men ask until they have to. Aurelius lived this consciously. He treated his role as temporary performance, not eternal identity. He cultivated inner resources independent of status. He studied philosophy not as hobby, but as the actual infrastructure of self that couldn't be taken away. He built a version of himself that didn't need Rome to be Rome. This is what modern men haven't done. You've spent 40 years making yourself dependent on conditions that you never had full control over, then act surprised when those conditions change. The identity beyond production. Building a self independent of career isn't about quitting work or rejecting ambition. It's about recognizing the philosophical category era, confusing temporary roles with permanent identity. A Stoic man understands the distinction. He has a career. He doesn't be a career. He produces value. He doesn't become the value he produces. This distinction, seemingly small, changes everything. To build this independence requires deliberate construction, not waiting until retirement forces it on you. First, discover what you actually value separate from paycheck. Not what sounds noble, not what impresses people, what genuinely compels you. What would you do if no one paid you and no one knew about it? Most men can't answer this question honestly because they've never asked it. They've outsourced their values to market demand. The market wanted certain skills, so they developed them. The market valued certain credentials, so they pursued them. The market rewarded certain behaviors, so they performed them. Their actual preference became irrelevant decades ago. Retrieving it requires excavation. What did you love before you learned to monetize? What activities make time disappear? Not for external reward. What absorbs you? This isn't indulgence. This is the foundation of post-productive identity. Second, cultivate mastery in something that isn't your job. Not as hobby, as serious discipline. Learn an instrument, study history deeply, master a craft, build something with your hands, write, photograph. Debate philosophy. The specific domain doesn't matter. What matters is that you know, in a visceral way, what genuine learning feels like, what real skill development demands, what it means to become competent at something purely because competence matters. This isn't distraction from work. This is creating an identity structure that doesn't depend on career. When you can be genuinely excellent at something that produces no income and no status, you've built psychological infrastructure that survives job loss, retirement, or failure. Third, invest in people and causes that have nothing to do with your career advancement. Your relationships become tools when you view them through professional lens. You network instead of connect. You mentor for credit instead of growth. You help to be remembered. A Stoic man reverses this. He gives without expectation. He connects without agenda. He builds relationships that have no market value and therefore survive market collapse. When you leave your job, your professional relationships mostly evaporate. People who wanted something from you want something from someone else now. This isn't betrayal. It's mathematics. But the person you genuinely cared for, who you helped without expectation, who you were honest with even when it cost you, that relationship remains. Fourth, develop a philosophy that isn't career-dependent. This is what Aurelius did obsessively. He read, he questioned, he thought about death, about virtue, about what matters. He built internal resources that couldn't be audited or evaluated or taken away. Stoicism wasn't his hobby. It was his operating system. Most men have no operating system beyond achievement. This makes them crash when achievement becomes impossible. The Marcus Aurelius principle, losing power and keeping value. Aurelius faced something most men never will, the absolute certainty that everything he had, all power, all authority, all position, would be removed at death. Not someday. He knew it precisely. His reign would end. His empire would pass to someone else. His name would become history. Everything he controlled would be controlled by someone else. Most men avoid this thought. Aurelius sat with it daily. You could leave life right now, he writes. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This isn't nihilism, it's the opposite. Once you accept that all external power is temporary, you stop building your identity on it. You stop needing it to feel valuable. You stop performing for audiences that will forget you. Aurelius continued to rule excellently. He didn't become apathetic. He didn't lose ambition, but he lost attachment to outcomes he couldn't control. He did his job excellently because excellence mattered, not because excellence secured permanence. He knew permanence was impossible. So he built something else, a character that remained unchanged whether he was emperor or prisoner, whether he succeeded or failed, whether history remembered him well or forgot him entirely. This is the actual Stoic move. Not detachment from effort, detachment from outcome dependency. A man facing retirement who has learned this doesn't collapse when the role ends because his value was never entirely in the role. He's disappointed perhaps, he mourns change, but he doesn't experience existential erasure. The practice, purpose beyond production. Practically, stop measuring your days by productivity. Most men do this automatically, every day evaluated for output. Did I earn enough, accomplish enough, advance enough? This metric enslaves you to conditions. It makes you dependent on markets you don't control. Replace it. Evaluate your days by whether you acted according to your values. Did I treat people with respect? Did I learn something? Did I refuse to do something I believed was wrong? Did I help someone without calculating benefit? Did I face something difficult without retreating into distraction? These measurements aren't market-dependent. You control them entirely. This sounds simple. It's actually radical. Most men have never run a day this way because they've never thought of days this way. Every minute organized around production metrics. Every hour justified by income or advancement. An entire life lived in instrumental mode. Nothing done for its own sake. Stoicism demands the opposite. Some things are done because they're right, not because they're profitable. Some time is spent because the spending itself is the point, not the productivity it generates. Some relationships are maintained because the person matters, not because the relationship benefits you. Practice this now, before retirement forces it. Start small. 1 hour weekly where you do something completely non-productive. Read philosophy. Sit with your thoughts. Work with your hands. Move without destination. Talk to someone without agenda. These aren't escapes from real life. They're construction of real life. Because when your career ends, if this is all you've ever done, you'll have no reference point for existence that isn't career-shaped. You'll be like a soldier returning home who doesn't know how to move through the world without a mission. Start building now, not as preparation for retirement, as the actual reclamation of self from the productivity machine you've been feeding for decades. The freedom that looks like loss. When it finally happens, retirement, redundancy, the job ending, a man who has done this work experiences something different than collapse. He experiences freedom with knowledge of how to use it. He experiences loss with identity that survives the loss. He experiences change without existential erasure. This is what the Stoics mean by freedom, not absence of obstacles. Freedom from needing obstacles to validate you, not escape from responsibility. Responsibility to yourself that doesn't depend on external circumstance. A man at 60 who has spent his 60s learning philosophy, building skill in something that doesn't produce income, cultivating relationships with no market value, organizing his days around virtue instead of productivity. That man isn't destroyed when the career ends. He's finally liberated. The trap closes only if you built your entire self inside it. Escape requires construction of identity parallel to your career, not separate after it ends. Your career was never supposed to be your life. It was supposed to be what you did. The confusion between those categories, between role and self, between doing and being, between temporary position and permanent character, is what kills men when the role disappears. Build differently. Build now. Build before you need to.